It's all in your head. The own mind is your best friend and worst enemy. Imagination is leading us, is leading our life. Everything we are able to build and able to create is starting in our own mind. Things we do, but also things we don't or can't do. Sometimes we enable ourselves, and sometimes we limit ourselves. Sometimes we do things we never thought we could, and sometimes we get lost in thoughts and do nothing at all. Overthinking is a big energy stealer and often gets into our way. Our own mind can be the greatest source, but to actually get things done, we have to get out of our head. Otherwise, thoughts stay thoughts, dreams stay dreams, and nothing is changing. Implementing our own ideas and dreams can be a big struggle, even and especially things we want the most. There are inner barriers, and overcoming these inner barriers is harder than we think. People often say, just do it. But it's not a just. Sometimes we get in our own way. Even though we want something, we can't always make it happen right away. Maybe it's the amount of effort we have to put in, or that voice in our head that tells us we can't do it. We make plans how something should be, how things should work, but sometimes we make it harder that way. In my mind, they are the greatest ideas and thoughts, but also a voice that drags me down. It's often hard to overcome my weaker self. By thinking negative, I also act pessimistic or don't do something at all. Sometimes it's like, the more I think about the result and the way to get there, the harder it gets done. Isn't that weird? Shouldn't it be easier, better planned it is? Overthinking is more obstructive than actually doing it and being in the moment. Of course, planning is really important, but the moment of leaping to the point where you start doing things is essential. There are a lot of examples in my life. I regularly drive with my car on a road that has a very sharp bend in it. The more I watch this bend and the more I think about it, the more insecure I get, and the slower I'm able to drive into the bend. After a long day, the only thing I want to do is to go to sleep. It's a big deal for me to go to the bathroom and get ready for bed. I tell myself, I'll only make a 10 minutes rest and get up again. Most of the time, I fall asleep instead. Whenever I don't fall asleep, it takes a lot more effort to get up again and go to the bathroom. Besides that, in the time I quarrel with myself, I'd already be done. Whenever I only got a certain amount of time for doing a task, I often think about the deadline and how much there's still to do. I lose more time and get more stressed. I try to distract myself from thinking about the deadline until I get to the point where I only work and stop thinking because there's not enough time left. The pressure makes me working very focused, but working under this kind of pressure is also very draining. I often stand in my own way because I'm a perfectionist. I want to do things the best way possible, but sometimes these expectations are unrealistic to achieve, so I keep kicking it down the road because I don't want to get disappointed. Not doing it at all kind of protects me from failing my own expectations. The more I think about things, the more difficult they seem to me. Sometimes, in my head, it's nearly impossible to do things. In retrospect, it wasn't that hard after the task is done. It gets better the moment I start doing things and cut out my thoughts of how to do it. I'm focusing on the here and now. Even though, because of my perfectionist thinking, there's always this background voice that asks, are you really doing it the right way? But I try to not let it dominate my actions. I'm sure I'll struggle sometimes, and there will be times I fall into old behavior patterns. But overall, it got much easier the more I got out of my head. Some people say it's easier to focus on the result. But for me, it's not working that well. As I explained before, I often start to build up unreachable high expectations to keep me from finishing tasks, or make the whole process much harder and more time-consuming than it has to be. In my life, overthinking has always been connected with procrastination. As long as I can remember, I've been very productive the more pressure there is. In school, I often procrastinated studying for a test or completing a project until there wasn't much time left. The more pressure I had, the more adrenaline kicked in, and the more focused and productive I was. But stress always drained my body and my mind. I always thought, next time I'll start earlier, but then the next time came, and the same thing happened again. I was mad at myself for letting it happen again, and made a schedule. This led my head to think more and more about it. My expectations of the end result grew to the point where they seemed impossible to do, and I procrastinated again. It was a vicious cycle. These behavior patterns still make my life difficult in certain situations. However, I learned a few tricks to get my mind out of these patterns. You have to figure out what works the best for yourself. You can try to adapt routines in your life. Whenever your mind starts to overthink, do a certain routine to distract yourself. Distraction in general seems to be a good thing to get out of your head. Controlling your breathing is one way to do this. Concentrate for 1 minute on slowly breathing in, holding your breath, and slowly breathing out. If it helps, you can count the seconds and find your own rhythm. After you finish that, you can focus on your task again. For others, it helps to focus on the result and not the way to get there. For me, this doesn't work that well. I rather break down the task in tiny steps and do one after the other. These steps doesn't seem to be that hard to do anymore. Another thing I do is to write down what I want and how to get to this point. Seeing these things in written form kind of takes away the pressure. I also write down side notes and little reminders. The moment I start overthinking again, I come back to my notes. These usually bring clarity to my mind. In this video I made a lampshade. Since my boyfriend and me moved into this place, proper lamps were the last thing to set up. Everyday life had us in its grip, so we postponed this task. Now I finally sat down and started doing something. Like a lot of things in my life, I just started doing it from scratch. And that's my last tip. If you tend to plan and overthink too much, start doing something from scratch. Of course it maybe won't work out and you have to figure out other ways, like you can see here with the lampshade. My first trials failed, but the end result was okay. Maybe it's not perfect, but I gained experience and can always rework that project. We humans are weird creatures with our twisted minds and complicated habits, and every human has its own way of doing things, its own way of thinking. We can't really compare each other, although there are big similarities. A lot of people struggle with same issues, but got their own way of handling things. I can only tell you about my own inner conflicts. We don't see the demons others have to fight with. Tasks that are easy for one person are really hard to do for another one. We can only see what other people let us see. Therefore, we should not judge them. They maybe struggle a lot. We shouldn't say, just do it. And we should always be mindful with our words. In life, we get to know other people. But most of all, we get to know ourselves. We have to figure out our own mind and how to deal with difficulties. It will be a lifelong lesson, and there's always something new to learn. One moment we figure out things, the next moment there are other difficulties to deal with. Our life is a process of learning, making decisions, solving problems. It's not easy, but the moment we accept that lifelong learning, it's not that hard to face these difficult things anymore.